Sandy Kane is no longer here, but his words are so clear. Say echo throughout our land. All his friends gave us all, stood the ground and took the fall to help their fellow man. Love your country and live with pride. And don't forget those who died. America, can't you see? All gave some gave all. Some stood through for the red, white, and blue, and some had to fall. And if you ever think of me, think of all your liberties and recall. Some gave all.
Welcome to this Veterans Day ceremony. This is the 30th consecutive year that Post 101 has conducted this courthouse ceremony. Our first was in 1982 at the time of the dedication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C. And our speakers that year, by the way, were Senators Melcher and Baucus, both. Now, every year we establish a theme for that year's ceremony. This year's theme is They Fought for a Place That We All Call Home. And I want to tell you how that theme came to me. About a month ago, I hadn't been able to think of a theme, work out a theme for this ceremony, and I was driving up to Charlotte with my daughter Erin, and we were listening to the radio, and we were talking about the how I hadn't come up with a theme, and actually we weren't talking. I was talking, she was nodding a lot and texting, and then the song came on the radio, and she's a fan of Dierks Bentley, so she reached over and turned up the volume and said, could we wait until after the song? So actually she said, shut up, I want to listen to this song. But the song was a song called Home, which we're going to be playing during the placing of memorabilia on this table. And it talks about America, it talks about the sacrifice, it talks about everything that America stands for. It's a great song, and it's the theme of our ceremony this year. Some people were worried, talked to me about this ceremony and wondering if the Occupy Missoula contingent was going to be here. And as you'll notice that they aren't here now. They had moved over to the other side of the courthouse lawn. But I do want to say that Curtis and Mark, the other people in Occupy Missoula, were extremely courteous and considerate, and had offered to shut down operations in respect for this Veterans Day ceremony, and I do thank them for that. Some people were worried that it would cast a shadow, but in a sense, I was thinking even if the protests were still here, in a sense, I don't think there's a shadow on the ceremony. The presence of these people is really a tribute to veterans. After all, they are exercising the rights that veterans fought to preserve, to defend, and so, regardless of our personal opinions about the issues that may be presented on any side of the political spectrum, the fact is that veterans can take a degree of pride just in knowing that our liberties are alive and well. And that's what Veterans Day is about. So as we get into this ceremony, I would like to introduce the Post 101 chaplain, Keith Jensen, who will help me MC this as well, but to deliver an invocation. I'd like to introduce Keith Jensen. Before Keith speaks, I do want to say one other thing. I appreciate the Veteran Warrior Society being here, the young people we have in period uniforms, and also Tawny Kerr, who sang the national anthem, is a Loyola senior. Probably be her last year here. She started doing this when she was in the 5th grade, when she was up in Charlotte. And she's been doing it ever since, and I think I just want to express my appreciation for all the years, and I think we should give her a round of applause.
Good and gracious God, we thank you that we as a free people have been granted this beautiful morning that we may solemnly remember and acknowledge the great sacrifice of those veterans who have given to us and protected for us the precious gift of our freedom. By your omnipotent will and benevolence, O God, we call upon you to continue to defend our liberties and to bestow wisdom upon those entrusted with authority, that they may guide us with strength and justice. Lord, there is a patriotic song that uses the words, some gave all gave some. We would lift up to you all veterans throughout our history, those who have made the supreme sacrifice in the defense of liberty, as well as those who survive. Today we would ask your protection and lift up to you those veterans who, as we gather here, are in harm's way in Iraq and Afghanistan. We pray that you will be with them and protect them so that they may return home safely. Amen.
And turn this over to Keith to MC. But first of all, our guests, if you wanted to have a seat, feel free. We got chairs just for you, so. And also, I want to comment, it's cold, that's obvious. See, money on my education wasn't wasted. But, you know, we've had this ceremony outside every year. We almost moved inside one year, but we decided that, you know, veterans don't get to choose the kind of weather they go to war in. And so we've been able to maintain and have this outdoor activity each year. And I suppose that's been a real strong decision on our part. I suppose as we get older, that decision may weaken a little bit, but that's why we have it outside, and that's why you're here freezing with us. And finally, I wanted to say that the Sergeant Sam Redfern of our soldiers, our period soldiers on the end, on the Iraq uniform. The other soldiers are students at Big Sky or Loyola High School, and I appreciate them coming out today. So now I'm going to turn this over to Keith Jensen, to Master of Ceremonies this thing for a while.
Well, good morning. It's a great day today, and so it gives me today great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, and that speaker is County Commissioner from Missoula County, Gene Curtis.
Good morning. Welcome to the county's public square. Dan told you the theme today was they fought for a place we call home, and we are all grateful. But let's not forget the military family's home that is often disrupted by deployment of a father, a mother, a son, or a daughter, and the stress involved. More than half of all military personnel have families. 1.2 million school-aged children's parents are in the military. Moving around and having a parent gone can lead to struggles in school. There are ways all of us can support military families when they call our town home. We can be a friend, be there to listen, try to understand, be a mentor, a tutor, a coach, attend a game with a kid, be a surrogate parent or a grandparent, invite them to dinner or for coffee, encourage them to attend college using the GI Bill that we're glad that we continue to have, and remember that all wounds are not visible. And I see one of our veterans out here today, Mr. Wilkins, who always tells us that they need socks for veterans at the Valor House, so he can take socks. General Colin Powell and his wife started an organization called America's Promise Alliance, and they recently added an initiative for military families. And this website has lots of ways to understand and support families. Last Friday, Missoula was fortunate to have the Grateful Nation Montana unveil the new military family memorial on the UM campus, the first in the nation. And the goal of that group is to ensure the children of the 40 men who have died in Iraq or Afghanistan will have a full ride scholarship to a university system school. What a great way to support military families. So today we join together to honor our vets, but we remember them every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. That was really a great message. I'm now going to read a letter that was forwarded to us from Senator Baucus. That letter reads as follows. Today, I want to say thank you. Thank you to our veterans and our troops currently serving. Thank you to their families. Thank you to their communities. As Montanans, we have deep appreciation for the sacrifices our veterans and their families have made. We are proud home to more veterans per capita than almost any other state. That's because service, patriotism, and a sense of duty are a part of who we are as Montanans. After September 11th, 2001, Montanans volunteered for service at a greater rate than anywhere else, and many of those brave men and women are still serving overseas today. Veterans Day takes on an even greater meaning in a time of war. Our servicemen and women who work abroad face some of the most difficult conditions. They serve every day, weekends, holidays, anniversaries, and birthdays, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Our troops are some of the hardest working Americans, and many of them are from Montana. Veterans Day is a time to remember the sacrifices they are making right now and of the sacrifices made by those who served before them. Sacrifices that helped build our country and the great state of Montana. This year, we celebrate Veterans Day with joy, knowing soon we will be welcoming home Americans serving in Iraq. These service members have made America proud, and bringing them home is the right thing to do. Now it is time to do the same in Afghanistan. It is time to bring our troops home and focus on the challenges we face right here in America. Among the greatest of these challenges is jobs, and it is shameful that the high unemployment rate is even higher for our veterans. At 20.1%, Montana currently has the fourth highest unemployment rate among Iraq and Afghanistan veterans in the nation. It is not right, and we can't let up until we make it right. That's why I'm working so hard to pass the Vets Job Act. This bill will give a tax credit to help businesses hire veterans, and I cannot think of a better investment than that. The Vets Job Bill is just one piece. I'm also sponsoring the Hiring Heroes Act to make it easier for veterans to translate the valuable skill they learn on the battlefield into civilian employment. If a service member can drive heavy equipment in Iraq, then they ought to be able to drive a truck here at home. If they can serve as a medic in Afghanistan, then they are certainly qualified to be an EMT in Montana. I am also pushing legislation to hold federal agencies accountable for meeting the goal to award at least 3% of federal contracts to small businesses owned by disabled veterans. And I have commissioned a study from the Independent Government Accountability Office to find ways our government programs can do a better job connecting veterans with the good-paying jobs they need. Today we say thank you, but it isn't enough just to say it. We must show our gratitude with the things we do, not just today, but every day. We must honor the sacrifices of our veterans have made fighting overseas by coming together to tackle the tough challenges we face here at home. We owe it to them to build a stronger Montana and a stronger America for the next generation. All my best, Max Lockett. And now I would like to introduce an old friend of mine. I guess Dan and I probably go back to probably about 1978 or so when I first met Dan Gallagher, and eventually talked me into joining the American Legion, and here I am yet today. And so with that, I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague and Vietnam War veteran, Dan Gallagher.
Thank you. I just wanted to say a few things about Veterans Day and about what it means and how it relates to our theme today. When Veterans Day comes around each year, it's hard for a veteran not to think of those with whom he served, his buddies. And that's especially true if the service occurred during time of war. As with many other vets, when I start thinking of my service, the faces of old buddies become crystal clear on that screen inside my mind, and their voices can be heard almost as if they were standing next to me talking into my ear. On occasions, they walk through my dreams. Too often, I find them in dreams that cause me to awaken with a start, sitting straight up, short of breath, my heart beating like it's about to throw a rod. The kind of dreams that make a veteran pray for a night of dreamless sleep. But sometimes, and more frequently of late, the dreams are more pleasant, they're more remembrances of old friends than they are frightening war stories. And in those dreams, the specific traits, the unique characteristics, The accents and the humor of those old comrades returns to my mind and leaves me with a warm feeling that kind of makes me sad that the dream had to end. For example, in my own experience, I'll hear Hajkis, who came from the Bronx, and his accent when he talked about going down to the PX to get him malted. I'd listen to Sergeant Hickox from Waycross tell stories with that soft Georgia drawl. I'll hear the thick Southern accent of Sanders from Hemphill, Texas. And when Private Moore from Southern California talks about hanging 10, I can almost hear Beach Boys in the background. There was Gonzalez from inner city LA, and Schroyer from Motown, DeBoard from Missouri, soldiers and buddies from every part of the country. And I hear my friend Willie, who died over there, talk about going home to Baltimore. And I'm sure every veteran in this crowd has similar memories. You know, for a farm boy from rural Montana, simply being exposed to many different subcultures represented by my fellow soldiers made me recognize our nation's diversity and yet appreciate how much we were all bonded together as Americans, all serving for a common purpose. It occurred to me then, and stands out to me now, that ours was an army that was made up of people representing the entire American nation. Not only were we from different places, the common distinctions that are found in all armies, our army represented every race, every religion, every lifestyle, every vocation, and every political persuasion that could be found in our country. Most other countries are bound together by a common race or ethnicity, or a common faith, or a common central culture, or a common origin, but not America. We're diverse, and in that diversity is much of our strength. And I also have come to the conclusion that much of our national identity and national pride has been formed and passed down to us by each consecutive era of America's veteran population. See, it was not just our nation's founders, incredible though they were, who started us on our road to nationhood. To a large degree, it was the colonial soldiers who endured Valley Forge and Yorktown who established the American nation, who moved our identity from that of royal subjects to that of American citizens. A few years later, a young America was solidly united as after our veterans had again defeated the British enemy and had reconfirmed and advanced our identity as Americans. In the mid-1800s, a horrible civil war literally divided our country. And at its start, Abraham Lincoln reminded us that all Americans were bound together by what he called the mystic cords of memory. 4 years later, with more than 600,000 American battle dead, the nation was at last reunited. Again, Lincoln set the standard for the whole population when he said, "Let us strive to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wound, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and orphan." Lincoln saw the country as whole again, as brothers and sisters, and he credited the soldiers, the veterans, with having preserved our nationhood. How much less would our problems have been, and how much better off would the veterans of this country be if we had followed through with the plans and hopes that Lincoln set for us. The veterans of the Civil War fought for their own region, but in the end they brought us together as a single nation and left us a heritage that still exists today. We Americans may all be individuals, but we are all Americans. The veterans who fought in France in 1918 established the country as a world power, as the great bastion of democracy, and it was these doughboys, as veterans, who embodied our nation's spirit and our identity. The veterans of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam were representatives of their time and their times. They reflected our belief that our freedoms were worth exercising and defending, but those freedoms did not come free. And now a new generation of veterans return home from war to what they have a right to assume will be a citizenry that respects their service and is grateful for their sacrifice. I would be derelict on Veterans Day not to point out that this nation has not always reciprocated the spirit or to the same extent that our veterans had demonstrated when they donned the uniform and stood up for the values and promises that were so important to the people of this country that sent them to war. When veterans return to find an unemployment rate of 20% that the care promised them is virtually unattainable when their VA claims languish in bureaucratic catacombs for month after month before being acted on, when the VA budget becomes a sacrificial lamb for our economic woes, then it's time for America to be reminded what it owes to those who have given the country its identity, who have made this place a place we can all call home. On a day in October 1962, when it could be announced that the Cuban Missile Crisis had been resolved, President Kennedy went into his office and dictated a letter of condolence to the parents of Major Rudolph Anderson, a U.S. Air Force pilot whose U-2 had been shot down over Cuba during that crisis. After expressing his sorrow, Kennedy used words that could just as easily be applied to every American soldier who died, who gave his life, who was wounded, who suffered the wounds that show no scars, who suffered from deprivation in the service to this country. To Major Anderson's parents, Kennedy said, "Your son rendered distinguished and dedicated service to his country. His tragic loss will be deeply felt, and a grateful nation will be forever in his debt." That debt of gratitude owed to America's veterans is a debt that must not go unpaid. On Veterans Day, we remind ourselves of that obligation. Now, earlier in this ceremony, we raised the American flag on the courtyard pole. That flag is a symbol of our country's ideals, our principles, our virtues, and our values. Veterans went to war to defend the freedoms and the liberties that we still enjoy and still exercise. They went to war so this nation would continue to be a land of promise and opportunity for all. They served so that Americans of all ages, regardless of race or sex or political beliefs or religion, would be able to hope and dream of a future. And they were willing to serve and sacrifice to secure and promote true justice and a genuine and lasting peace. And from sea to sea, from border to border, from mountain and from plains, they also went to defend their homes, their personal homes, as well as this place that we all call home. So today, Veterans Day, in Missoula, around Montana, and across this country, Americans will see the waving flag, and they'll know what it stands for and who defended it. A grateful citizenry will look up at that flag and perhaps even beyond it. And if they do, I have no doubt that they'll also see that there is a special light that shines on this land, a very special light that still shines down on this place that we all call home. Thank you.
I see her stretching out below. Land, blessed motherland, the place where I was born. Scars, yeah, she's got her scars. Sometimes it starts to worry me. 'Cause lose, I don't wanna lose sight of who we are. From the mountains high to the wave crash coast, there's a way to find better days. I know it's been a long, hard ride, got a ways to go, but this is still the place that we all call home. the sea. Then they sign their names for something they believe. How the blood ran red, we laid our dead in sacred ground. Just wonder what they did if they could see us now. It's been a long, hard ride, got a ways to go, but this is still the place that we all call home. It's been a long, hard ride, and I won't lose hope. This is still the place that we all call
We continue our program now, and I would like to introduce our next speaker, who is the current mayor of the city of Missoula, John Engen.
Well, good morning, and on behalf of the City of Missoula, welcome. Thank you for being here, and thanks always to Post 101 for bringing us together to celebrate and remember. I don't often write these things down, but I thought I needed to this morning so that I would remember what I wanted to say. Roy William Engen would have been 90 years old a month from today. He died in his sleep 13 months ago tomorrow. He was my dad. Born in Wahpeton, North Dakota, Roy enlisted in the North Dakota Army National Guard in 1939. He was 17 years old. He was called to active duty in the United States Army, Company I, 164th Infantry in February of 1941, and was honorably discharged as a sergeant in June of 1945. He served overseas for 3 years, 1 month, and 14 days, first at the Battle of Guadalcanal, then in the Solomon Islands and the East Indies campaigns. Roy was reluctant to tell war stories. When he did, he talked about the men with whom he served. He kept in touch with those men for years at annual reunions of Company I, until many of its members were too frail to gather or already gone. He never wanted to go camping after the war. I missed this ceremony last year for the first time since I was elected Missoula's mayor. My dad's passing was too fresh, and I frankly did not want to fall apart in front of all you good people. Time heals, but it also teaches. I loved and respected my dad in life, but only since he's been gone have I come to appreciate the depth of the man's character and strength. Folks in the community who read Roy's obituary offered me histories of the war in the Pacific. An older cousin who was a kid when Dad returned from the war told me he'd been Dad's confidant, someone he could talk to about the 3 years, 1 month, and 14 days he spent overseas. By all accounts, every one of those days was brutal. I know more about my dad today than I did a year ago, and I wish I could ask him some questions. How did he come back to make a normal life work? How did any of those men and women? And how did they do it after Korea and Vietnam and Afghanistan and Iraq? How are the kids coming home today making it work? And how many aren't? How are we fixing them? And how many more young men and women will we send somewhere to be forever damaged, body or mind or both, on our behalf, before we consider the toll too high? I don't know the answer, but I do know that on Veterans Day, we're obliged to be grateful to the folks we put in harm's way, while we're similarly obliged to ask why we've done it and if we should continue. Again, I don't pretend to know the answer to that incredibly complicated question, but I do know that the day we fail to consider it, we fail ourselves, our country, our Constitution, and the women and men we honor today. I am in awe of human capacity for living through and with pain, and I am grateful to you veterans, the quick and the dead, who accepted that pain and its consequences in the name of duty and on behalf of the rest of us. Dad and all the lost boys with whom you entered battle, thank you and rest in peace. And to my friends here who served and continue to serve, thank you, and may you and we all live in peace.
Next on our program, I'm going to read a letter from Senator Tester. His Veterans Day message. It says, "Thank you for being a part of this year's events honoring Americans' veterans. This is an opportunity to reflect on the sacrifices made by Americans' heroes. It is a day to say thank you to the folks who fought for and gave us the freedoms we all enjoy, the freedoms too many Americans take for granted. To all men and women who serve this nation and to those who continue to serve, thank you. Thanks also to the spouses and kids of our veterans here today. Answering the call of duty is a shared sacrifice. As your U.S. Senator, it is my role to make sure that this nation lives up to its promises to every American who serves in our military. It is a role I take seriously. This week, I had the honor of pushing a bipartisan jobs bill for veterans through the U.S. Senate. Our bill makes the transition between military service and civilian work as seamless as possible by connecting veterans with good-paying jobs. I am pleased to report that our bill passed the Senate with bipartisan support. It passed because of Montana's veterans who brought their ideas and concerns to me. I hope that's something you will continue to do in the months ahead. I join all Montanans and all Americans when I say thank you and job well done. God bless. John Tester.
I now want to introduce a speaker, a primary speaker, who's I've been trying to get here for the last several years to speak, and assuming that he was going to be unable to do it again this year, I didn't call, and his office called me. So it's a little bit frightening when you get a phone call from a judge, but it is. I would like to introduce a person who was in the U.S. Navy, a naval flight officer on an F-4B Phantom, Air Wing 1. He flew from the deck of the USS John F. Kennedy during the Vietnam War. He is a Vietnam-era veteran, as well as being a federal district judge here in Missoula. I'd like to introduce the Honorable Donald Malloy.
Thank you, Dan. It is an honor and a privilege for me to be here on Veterans Day. When Dan asked me to speak almost a year ago, I began to wonder what it is that I could say in 5 minutes that would reflect on the importance of those to whom we pay homage and whose sacrifices and lives we honor. It is clear that we acknowledge the end of the hostilities of the war to end all wars, when the armistice agreement between the Allies and Germany was signed on the 11th day of the 11th month at the 11th hour of 1918. Perhaps that moment was but a small antecedent to the anticipation and hope of peace. But as all who have served recognized and know, The anticipation of peace is only the greater part of hope, too often silenced by the rhetoric of politics and the realities of more war. I also thought about Dr. Mary E. Walker, who was the first woman awarded the Medal of Honor for her work as a military surgeon in the Civil War. The medal was bestowed on her on November 11th of 1865. But my thoughts could not be constrained from thinking about those who have served that are closer to me and closer to home. And in doing so, what keeps traversing my mind and coursing my thoughts is the loneliness that we visit upon those who serve and the emptiness we create for those at home who have given a son or daughter willingly to serve our nation and to sacrifice for all of us, with the fervent hope that those who serve will return safely and securely, but recognizing they have committed to making the ultimate sacrifice in the service of our country. Last night I had the time and took the time to read a treasure from World War II that has been a part of our family since my father served as a B-17 pilot in World War II. It is a letter dated August 22nd, 1945, from the mother of one of his crewmen. The crewman, Jack, was the ball turret gunner on my father's crew in the Bouncing Baby Boy, the name painted on his B-17. When the war in Europe was coming to a close and the bombing raids on Germany were fierce and monstrous, Jack had completed his missions. But he was not sent home. He was placed with another crew and was killed on his final mission. Fate in war often leads to a hopeless reflection of what ifs. But what is striking about the mother's letter, and is so poignant in its language, is the sense of loss and sacrifice experienced by mothers and fathers of a generation of our nation that was willing to make the common sacrifice and who understood that a grateful nation cannot leave the dirty work of war to a few, but must acknowledge that it is a common sacrifice for all that is the parent of success. These thoughts have even more meaning and are closer to home for my family. Our son, Lieutenant Mike Malloy, is a Navy pilot, and like those with whom he serves, he is following in the path of the sacrifice that was blazed by the greatest generation. He's readying for his second deployment to the Middle East, and like all who serve with him, he is doing so at great personal sacrifice. By taking the oath to serve, our men and women in uniform must accept a life of great sacrifice. Long deployments, multiple deployments, separation from loved ones, tests and trials that most Americans cannot imagine. But that is the oath they take. It's the life they choose. It is the promise that they make to America. And we honor them for that, and we should strive to have an America that welcomes them home, and an America that respects what they do and the greatness of the ideas they have sworn to uphold that are in our Constitution. That means we must make a commitment to those who serve that transcends ribbons and cliches, but which reaches out in thanksgiving for their sacrifices. Carl Melantes, who lives in the state of Washington, recently published a book entitled What It Is Like to Go to War. The book is overwhelmingly honest and should be required reading for any policymaker who believes that war is the answer. His book teaches and reflects an account of how, after being taught to kill, he learned to deal with the aftermath. He knows what it is that we face as a nation, with sons and daughters returning from the stresses of multiple deployments and separations in the longest wars in our nation's history. And they need to return, as they return, We need to prepare to welcome them and not just stir a cauldron of apathy, but one of concern. Nearly a century ago, President Teddy Roosevelt spoke at the United States Naval Academy when the body of John Paul Jones was returned to that institution from its earlier burial place in France. The crowds assembled, the bands played, the cannons roared, and as John Paul Jones' body was carried to the yard, President Roosevelt spoke to the midshipmen. And what he said is, remember, our words of admiration are but as sounding brass and tinkling cymbals if we do not prepare to emulate their deeds. On this November day, at the 11th hour of 2011, as a community and as a nation, let us strive to emulate the deeds of those who serve, and that we do more than sound the brass or wave the cymbals. We should give them meaning, honor, courage, and commitment. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and God bless those who serve and sacrifice for all of us.
We, every year, we have a special part of their ceremony where we involve all of you people, veterans, family members, people out here who want to remember a veteran that is important in their life. And Post 101 buys red, white, and blue flowers, and we give them out. All of you who want to place a flower on this table in remembrance of a veteran important in your life. We begin this flower placement, and everyone's free to take a flower. There's no cost, and free to come up, and as you come up, you can mention the name of the person you're remembering if you care to. As you place the flower, make the sign of the cross, salute, whatever it is you want to do. That'll be your moment. We begin that portion of this ceremony, though, with Congressman Rehberg placing the first flowers on this table. Now, Congressman Rehberg, his office contacted me last week and said that he was going to be in Missoula and would I like him to be here, and duh. So he's here, and he's going to lead the flower placement and then help with the wreath laying and a few remarks later. So at this time, if we could, we'll begin our flower placement ceremony, and those of you can wait until the first flowers have been placed, and Dana and Aaron and Kylie are back there. We'll hand you the flowers, and we'll go from there. So let's begin the flower placement, Congressman.
Assistant Squadron Command, and he flew way more missions than he had to, and he could have come home, but he wouldn't stop flying with this man until he was shot down in July of 1945 and killed. Thank you.
John Alexander Cahutas.
This flower I laid here today is for Lieutenant General Chesty Puller, the most decorated Marine in Marine Corps history.
I appreciate this endurance in the cold, but we actually got a pretty good day. Turn my tape over. Have a pretty good day for this compared to some other years, but I want to introduce my next guest, but I want to preface the introduction by saying that, veterans, as we've talked about, veterans fight for a number of things. Veterans fight to defend their homes, the place that they call home, the collective place, as well as their own homes. They fight for liberty. They fight also for opportunity. Veterans serve this country also for justice and peace. And, we have to ask, what is peace? It's not simply the absence of war, but we need peace. We need justice in order to enjoy the liberties that our veterans have defended. So what is peace? Peace is not just the absence of war. Peace is, as John Kennedy said in his American University speech, what kind of peace do we seek? I'm talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living. I think a lot of veterans believe that advocating for peace somehow is a betrayal of their veteranness, that they can't be veterans and peace advocates at the same time. But I, on the other hand, believe that advocating for peace is actually a tribute to our fallen comrades. What better way could we honor those we served with and who died than work for a world where there is no more war? Being a veteran advocate and a peace advocate actually puts us in pretty good company. At the end of the remarks that I quoted from Lincoln earlier, when he talked about caring for him who shall have borne the battle, he finished that by saying to preserve for posterity a just and lasting peace for ourselves and for all nations. On D-Day in 1944, Franklin Roosevelt, president of the nation at war, led the country in announcing the D-Day invasion, led the country in a prayer that he had written. And in that prayer, he said that our soldiers do not fight for conquest, they fight for home, and they fight for peace. And if that's not enough to put you in good company, I would remind everyone that there was a man from Tennessee who, in World War I, captured an entire company of enemy soldiers single-handedly, won every medal, was the greatest war hero of the 20th century. And that man was named Alvin York. But it's good to know, and we need to be reminded, that Sergeant Alvin York began his military career as a conscientious objector. And I don't think any of us would call Sergeant York a wimp. Vets and the peace movement or the anti-war movement have often been at odds. When I came back from Vietnam, my first sight of civilian America was a protest demonstration, and I saw people with hate in their eyes carrying signs like "baby killer." The veteran community and the peace community at that time and for years thereafter considered themselves as adversaries. But as the years go by, we come to see that actually the veteran population has a lot in common with the peace advocacy. Anyone who's been to war, anyone who's witnessed combat, surely wants peace. And we have differences on how we're going to reach that peace, but that's okay in this country. It's okay to argue. It's okay, as Thomas Jefferson said, that not every difference of opinion is a difference of principle. And so it's okay that we continue to disagree, but also that we share what we have in common. Today I'm going to do something that I couldn't have done a few years ago, I personally couldn't have done, and I don't think we would have been, as a society, ready for this. But there are some people in the peace movement in particular who have reached out to the veteran community to help build a bridge between the two communities and try to develop those things we do have in common. One of those people is here today. She has been to every Veterans Day ceremony in recent years. She's a person who has really opened dialogue between these two communities. So I want to say it's my pleasure to be able to introduce to you to speak at this Veterans Day ceremony the Executive Director of the Jeanette Rankin Peace Center, Betsy Mulligan Day.
Thank you, Dan. I don't know of many people who are as committed to serving veterans as Dan Gallagher, and I appreciate and am inspired continually by his passion and commitment. My thanks also to all of you for allowing me to be here and express my appreciation and the appreciation of the peace community that I represent. I know how important today is to all of you and your families, and I'm honored to be part of it. It is a unique privilege for me to share the podium with Congressman Rehberg and Judge Malloy, but by far the greatest honor is for me to simply be here. Usually I stand out there quietly and mingle unknown. So today, my being asked to speak is an affirmation that it is not only the veteran community who stops on this day to honor the service and sacrifice of our veterans. It is the entire community. I spent 7 years as a social worker in the Department of Veteran Affairs in Oklahoma. And each year we planned an event on this day to honor the men and women who were in long-term care facilities and hospitals in Oklahoma. They were joined by veterans and active duty personnel from around the state in celebration of the sacrifices and service that they had made and were continuing to make in service to our country. I learned then how important today is to say thank you for a thankless job, to celebrate the pride of serving with honor and courage,
to appreciate those who have often been slighted in our communities, and to remember those who gave their lives. There are many ways to serve. All of us here most likely can list many causes that we serve and many ways in which we do so. We all deserve appreciation and respect for the ways we choose to contribute. Service to others or to an ideal greater than oneself is one of the greatest gifts we can give in life and one of the most important sources of personal satisfaction and strength. But perhaps none is so profound as the willingness to risk one's life, to uproot oneself from family and community and comfort, and to go into the unknown with its risks and fears. It is that willingness to serve above and beyond that we are here today to honor. And I can assure you that even people who disagree with you on some issues are still standing up today to say they are proud of you and thankful for the service that you've provided this country. I don't know what you went through as veterans. I've read about it and I've talked to people who've served, but I cannot know the emotions of that experience. I do know how important that service is to you and to all of us. We don't hear enough about the good deeds that our military does around the world, but I know they exist. It is an inspiration for me to witness the deep and meaningful bonds that connect you to each other. It may be a model for all of us in terms of service to an ideal and to each other as human beings. Some of the most inspirational stories I've heard are ones about our men and women in service and the great lengths that they go to care for and protect each other. Those stories can teach us all to be better people. Martin Luther King said, "A man who wouldn't die for something is not fit to live." It is important to all of us that you have been willing to sacrifice your lives for a cause that you believe in, for a country that we all live in. Now, we have a complicated history together. Somewhere along the line, veterans and peace advocates began to view each other as enemies. The more we nurtured those divisions, the harder it has become for us to see our common humanity. We must separate the politics from the personal. We will always have differences. I would take a guess that no two people out there today agree on every single issue or position. Those differences will always be there. We can choose to learn from them or be divided by them. Some of our best decisions as a nation have been those where dissenting opinions opened up doors of dialogue and deeper understanding. And likewise, some of our biggest failures have been from the divisions we impose on each other. I know that many of you were called horrible names and were ridiculed and harassed by people who claim to be about peace. I don't know who those people are, and I can only hope that they grew in wisdom as time went on. I wish I could go back and howl at the injustice and unkindness shown you, but I cannot. We can only go forward together. I deeply regret what they did, and I regret that they did it in the name of peace. Rather than making peace, it created a huge divide that we have had trouble crossing. A divide that each side may have nurtured with rhetoric and blame, and it removed the opportunity we had to learn from each other, to listen, and to appreciate each other. On behalf of the peace community, I am here today to do that, to try to right a wrong and to reopen a door, to express our sorrow for the unkindness, to reach out in understanding, and to stand in appreciation for what you've done. Peace, as I'm sure every veteran can attest, is not gained by taking the easy way or by talking only to the choir. For some of you, having me here may be uncomfortable, and some people in the peace community may be uncomfortable coming here. It is time that we put those feelings aside and learn to listen and appreciate each other. We have different perspectives for sure, but we have a wealth to teach each other. Our differences will never be as important as the things that we have in common. Like our humanity, it strikes me that this holiday is one that truly brings the various components of our melting pot together. How many of us, regardless of our politics, have family and friends who served as veterans and may have even died? And every religion, race, ethnicity, gender, and sexual orientation is represented in the ranks of our military. We are all connected by a similar humanity with all its similar desires for happiness, accomplishment, and honor. Human life is precious to all of us. Perhaps veterans can teach us that better than most. And our common search for peace. No veteran I know went to war to make sure that war continued and that people would continue to die in bloody conflicts. You signed up, you served, because you wanted a world at peace, a world safe from terror and conflict. The Missoulian from October 30th had an article entitled, "It's a Peaceful World," about 3 recent books that make the case that our world is becoming less violent. From battlefields to the inner cities, we are learning things. It is clear to me that what we are each doing to create peace must be working. And if we could only join forces, how much more of an impact we could have. We all respect and admire our nation's great tradition of service to country and to each other. Montana, as already been said, has one of the highest rates of service to the military, of recruits to the Peace Corps, and of volunteers at various nonprofits in our community. William James said, "The great use of life is to spend it for something that outlasts it, and service to others is something we all value." And finally, we want to see a better world. We all want to see a better world, and we all want to play our part in its creation. We may disagree on the way to get there, but that doesn't mean that one of us is wrong. I believe in a world where there are many ways to solve a problem. The more we can put on the table and try, the more ideas we can generate, the closer we will come to solutions. Men and women in the military have sacrificed a great deal for their country. It strikes me that one part of that better world we can work for is our obligation to ensure that they have excellent physical and mental health services, educational opportunities, and community support. The unemployment rate for veterans returning from Iraq and Afghanistan is unacceptably high, and we need to do a better job of finding opportunities for them to put their skills to work when they return home. Let's put aside our differences and solve those problems together. Our differences will never be as important as the things that we have in common: humanity, service, and the desire for a better world at peace. And our causes should never, ever preempt our caring for each other. Appreciating the service and sacrifice of our veterans and their families is not a political issue, and it is not connected to the politics of any particular war. It is a human issue that we all share. Martin Luther King said, "Everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love." To every veteran here and not here, I say, you are great because you have chosen to serve with all your life and to offer everything you had to ensure and protect the ideals of this place we all call home. I offer you the gratitude of the entire community. Thank you.
want to thank Betsy for her words. One thing, however, I told Betsy when I'd asked her to speak that we might take some hits for this, having a peace advocate speak at a Veterans Day ceremony. We both might take some hits, and I promised her that I'd bring a couple of flak jackets just in case. But Betsy, I lied. I've got nothing. You're on your own. Okay. We have another guest here, and I'll let Keith introduce.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce our last speaker for the day. He is the current member of the U.S. House of Representatives for the state of Montana. I would like to introduce Dennis Rehberg.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I always worry when I'm the last. One time I was introduced, they said least but not last, Denny Rehberg. They got it wrong. I decided to change my speech just the other day. I'm not going to start it out by saying I'd like to talk to you about three things today. That didn't work so well for another individual earlier. But I want to thank you for allowing me this opportunity to be with you today. On Veterans Day, our nation unites in heartfelt appreciation for the service to our nation, and the cause of freedom that is the legacy of America's veterans. We know that without their sacrifice, our great nation could not exist. It's really important to understand the unique place the American soldier holds in our history. Perhaps two common photographs can help. The first is a picture of a soldier's homecoming. They just stepped off the plane onto the tarmac and are embraced in tearful hugs from their loved ones. At once, these pictures embody the depth of sacrifice that these men and women make and the reason they make it. In the course of history, armies were often formed with men who had nowhere else to turn. But in America, our all-volunteer force is comprised of the very best of our society. They have families that love them and the ability to chase their hopes and dreams. But they also have the courage to fight and protect these things. Above all else, soldiers want to come home. Yes, they fight for their country and die for their friends, but they live to come home. The second common picture is that of the American soldier deployed into a theater of conflict, putting his or her body between innocent civilians and danger. Is there any other country where this could happen? In the course of history, military force has often been used to empower the strong and subjugate the weak. But in America, the strong in the military use their strength to protect the weak. It is because of this that our nation is so proud of our military. They are recognized around the world as a force for good and for freedom. At the same time, they are feared by the very tyrants who rule by fear and murder. Soldiers give us the most important gift of all: peace in America, freedom in America. The United States is far, far removed from turmoil and danger. And for this wonderful gift of peace and freedom, we have only one person to give thanks to: the American soldier. They choose to protect us and give us this gift, and only ask in return for remembrance of their duty. It was an honor for me to be able to place the first 3 flowers on the table in memory. I was speaking in Whitefish yesterday at the rally on the statue on Big Mountain, and I realized there's a lot of things you can argue about in society: bobcat versus grizzly, snowboard versus skis. But the one thing we can't ever argue about is the importance of duty as we know it, the service of our country by those veterans who have gone and given us this protection that we have to gather today. I was also reminded yesterday when I was speaking of my grandmother who died 3 days short of her 100th birthday a few years ago. And I heard a story that I committed to memory because it meant so much to me. And it was a story about a fellow by the name of Gino Calabrese. He was dying of terminal cancer, and he finally fell into a coma. And his wife of 55 years was sitting next to him at that bed, hoping that he'd come out of the coma just one more time, so she could tell him how much she loved him, how much she cared. We'll never really know what happened, but obviously, after several days, she fell asleep. And while she was asleep, her husband Gino came out of his coma, and he reached across his body with his left hand, and he wasn't left-handed, and he grabbed a pad and a pen off the nightstand, and he put it on his chest, and he wrote some words on this pad with his left hand that was so meaningful that somebody put it to music. It's a famous song by Frank Sinatra. I'm not going to sing it because I'm not good at that. But written on this pad, it said, "Softly I will leave you, for my heart would break if you should wake and see me go. Long before you miss me, long before your arms can beg me to stay, for one more hour or one more day, I can't bear to see the tears fall. So I leave you softly, so I leave you now." It's the level of care that has to exist in the hearts and the minds of those of us if we think of the veterans who don't make it back, of the veterans who are in our presence who have difficulty because they might have been wounded, or the illness that you do not see. As I laid those flowers, I remembered my grandmother, because her oldest grandson, my cousin, was not a survivor in Vietnam. Oh, he made it home okay, but he was also addicted to drugs and alcohol, and eventually drank himself to death. So when I work on things like PTSD, and when I work on things like the problems that exist in Walter Reed, and the stories you hear, and the treatment, the homelessness that exists within our veterans, it is unacceptable as a nation. We have to have more care than that. We have to have more feeling than that. We have to believe, like Gino Calabrese, that I want to leave something better for my country. And that's what this celebration is all about. That's what Veterans Day is all about. And Memorial Day, but we must remember every day of every year, of every decade, those that serve to give us the opportunity to stand here today and feel the freedom to speak our hearts, our minds, and our souls. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity as your United States representative in Washington, D.C. But more importantly, I thank those individuals that sit behind me and in the audience, including my own staff, who had gone to Iraq to serve our country, and the wounded warriors that I've hired for my office. I say thank you for giving us the peace, the freedom, the faith, the family of this great United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Rehberg. Lest anyone think that I'm purposely violating protocol here, I want to make it clear that the ceremony was set up, and I was under the assumption that the congressman would not be able to come back to Missoula at this time. And a few days ago, his office called and said that he was available, as I said earlier, and so. He's our last speaker, not because he's least, but I like to put it this way. I like to think that he's batting cleanup for us here, you know. So we're going to place wreaths on wreath stands out in front as our closing act, closing part of our ceremony, and we're going to have a brief prayer here. But before we do, a couple of things I want to remind or say. First of all, I want to thank everybody. The students, I want to thank everybody who's been involved, the Veterans Warrior Society, John at Mountain FM who dubbed our music, a lot of people to thank. And I want to also remind everyone that over at the Old Post Pub, when this ceremony is over, we will be serving free of charge to veterans and families the military culinary delight that is referred to as SOS. And as we all know, SOS literally stands for chipped beef on toast. So, I would at this time, by the way, during the wreath placement ceremony, Tawny Kerr will be singing a vocal battle hymn, and she'll be accompanied by Morgan Griffin, who's a senior at Loyola, on the violin. And I want to thank both of them as well today. So, again, Keith, would you lead us in our closing prayer?
Good and gracious God, as we conclude, we humbly bow our heads in prayer, asking that you bless and protect all veterans. We ask your continued blessing for Missoula, for the great state of Montana, and for the United States of America. Through your grace, this great nation has persevered through every trial, and if it be your will, through your grace, these United States shall continue to persevere far into the future. Amen.
I want to thank you all for coming and staying in the cold. And I want to introduce Tawny Kerr and Morgan Griffin. They'll do music that accompanies the wreath placement ceremony, and we'll follow that with taps.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightning, his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on.
Again, I want to thank everyone for coming and staying. The Old Post Pub, by the way, is 103 West Spruce. Meet you over there. And so, that concludes our ceremony. At this time, I'll ask the color guard to retire the colors. Thank you all.